Hi everyone, this is EDIT 5100, Chapter 2, Assistive Technology to Support Writing. So let's start off by examining what is writing. It is a complex problem-solving activity that involves thinking, planning, decision-making, and the mechanics of transcription. And the last part is just basically, the typing or the writing of the words. Flower and Hayes also said that there's the task environment, which are things outside of the writer's skin, and then the rhetorical problem or the assignment itself. There's also the writer's long-term memory that needs to be used because there's stored knowledge there, not only of the topic, but of the audience and the various writing plans. So in your head, you're also thinking about who you're writing this for. So if you're writing a report for your teacher, then you need to also realize, oh, well, this is how my teacher is expecting it, so this is how I'm going to write it, right? Whereas if you wrote it for your friends, it would be a different way of writing it as well. Writing process itself is planning, translating, and of course, reviewing. Planning is also known as pre-writing when it comes to what we're talking about. So planning for writing is generating ideas, brainstorming ideas, collecting relevant information, organizing the ideas into some kind of meaningful structure and sequence, and of course, setting the goals for composition. Okay. Tompkins also said that spending 70% of writing should be spent on pre-writing skills. Do you agree with that? Do you spend about 70% of your time thinking about all these things before you finally write? For some of you, yes. Some of you guys pre-plan so much that it's like 5 minutes before the paper is due and you're going to start writing then, right? Of course, obviously I'm joking right now. Translating is also known as drafting. Develop ideas and thoughts into meaningful words, sentences, and paragraphs. It requires thinking and mechanical process such as typing or writing. The reviewing process is when you reread and evaluate what you have already written. The editing is, of course, edit and revise their draft, which is basically changing it in terms of spelling, grammar, organizational structure, word choice, and content. Good writers continuously generate new ideas, reorganize their thoughts, and set new goals. And then, of course, sharing and or publishing it. And that could be, printing it out and then submitting it to your teacher, or publishing it in a newspaper, or whatever format, a text, an email, and stuff like that. Okay, so now that we have a basic understanding of all the components when it comes to writing, let's talk about problems that students with disabilities have with writing. Language and learning disabilities, are also known as LLDs, do not plan because they do not know how to plan. The result is that their papers are shorter, less coherent or makes less sense, less refined, which means not as sophisticated as you would want it to be, not as complicated as the age level, or maybe even lifeless. Okay, students who are deaf, English is their second language. And if you don't understand that, let me just explain really quickly for you. Okay, so when you see someone do sign language, ASL, they're not saying exactly what we are saying when we speak, okay? So instead of saying, let's say, I'm going to go to the store today, right? Instead of saying all of that, the person might sign, I store now, okay? So that means I'm going to the store right now, okay? So I'm going to put a link on this where basically you'll see this wonderful song by a person named Miley Cyrus called Party in the USA. And you will see basically in this the song, what Miley is singing, and then you'll also see what the interpreter who is doing the sign or the gloss, which is what it's called, of what she is singing. And you'll realize, oh, they're kind of different. And this is why when a person who is deaf is writing and they're familiar with sign language only, is that they're really learning another language because there's no tense and all that other stuff. People with cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, and physical disabilities struggle with the mechanics of writing. So we're talking about people with physical disabilities. The holding of the pencil or the typing could be a very big challenge for them. Cannot hold pencils and do not have the fine motor skills needed to manipulate a pencil or a keyboard. All right, emotional and behavioral disabilities, that means that maybe they have not enough self-regulation, so they don't know how to control themselves in certain circumstances. Lack the behavioral self-control to remain engaged in the academic tasks, so they may get bored and they might, do other things, might get antsy, and then want to change. Autism or other learning disabilities struggle with forming letters correctly, forming them quickly, and aligning them properly on paper. May have lots of ideas, but cannot get their thoughts on paper, or handwriting may be illegible. So if you look at that, there's a link right there too at Amazon. We're going to do a lot of Amazon shopping in this PowerPoint. And I'm going to show you what that thing, which is the image of that black thing with the lines on Amazon. And what that is a writing guide. So it's a little piece of plastic with the holes cut out. And so you put it down on a piece of paper, and that allows the student to use a pencil and write within those lines so that they're actually straight lines. When you lift off that piece of guide, you'll know that the person has now written in straight lines instead, which is the goal, okay? And there's actually different types. There's also one for a credit card size one that is for a signature that I will also link later on, as well as one for an envelope for writing letters, writing checks, and so forth and so on. Okay. Struggles with the mechanics can lead to behavioral problems. So let's say that the person is really frustrated that they cannot write, and so then they become upset and then may exhibit some behavioral issues. Note-taking is another area that might be very difficult. It's a specialized form of writing. Not all of us know how to take notes. Students with disabilities may miss important points and produce notes that are incomplete, incoherent, or ineffectively organized. Okay, and I will tell you this, sometimes I'll have a student who has an accommodation for, let's say, note-taking, right? And then a person will volunteer to note-take. I've had many students who think that note-taking is transcribing what I say. I talk a little fast, right? And also sometimes I don't talk about things that are important, you know? And the student is like, I can watch them desperately try to write it down or type it on their keyboards, and then I'll get them like a week or two later going, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be a good note taker because I just cannot type everything that you're saying. A good note taker doesn't need to transcribe everything. A good note taker should be able to find out what the important points are and then write those things down. And that should then be able to help you with your studying, right? It makes studying difficult for a test if you don't know how to take the proper notes. The ability to listen and write at the same time can be challenging for some people because writing is one thing when you're looking and you're writing while you're listening to the teacher at the same time can be very complicated. Ability to organize the ideas that are presented. So, you know, how do you structure it? Do you structure it in bullet points? How do you do it? Because that will also help you tell which one are the main topics. Maybe you highlight the main topic so it's easier to see. And of course, ability to distinguish what is important from what is not. Because sometimes teachers will talk about things that are funny or fun that might be related, but not necessarily something that would, let's say, be on a test or anything like that. So let's talk a little bit about low-tech adaptations for writing. The first thing is pencil grips. And pencil grips are basically the little plastic rubbery thing, or it could be also made of clay or modeling clay of some sort that allows a person to be able to hold a pencil or a pen very easily. You usually see those pretty often. They're pretty common. There's also the slant board, which is basically just a shelf where you can now raise the angle of the surface of the writing so that maybe a person who has struggles with writing right over a desk, they don't have to let's say hunch over, it might hurt their necks or exhaust their necks or their backs. Instead, this thing is now lifted up so it's closer to their face so that they can write and see without having to struggle. And we see that with a lot with drafting tables for architects as well. There's also anchoring paper on a clipboard, which is a clipboard, because for some of us, we cannot hold the paper with one hand because of our physical disability or whatever. And if you've ever tried to write, fill out a form with no clipboard with just one hand, you'll notice that your paper will start to shift around a lot, right? So having just even a clipboard can be really helpful for a person with a disability so that they can write. Paper that has raised lines or bold lines. So they're both hyperlinked here. Raised line is basically kind of like, if you've ever had a wedding invitation, you know how the flower or whatever, when you touch it, you can feel the flower texture. Same thing, it's just the texture of a long line. And that will help some students when they're writing. And I hyperlink that onto Amazon so you can see what it looks like. And it's usually pretty affordable. There's also bold lines. So instead of like the thin little line, the contrast might not be good enough for a child with a disability. So this one we have thicker, blacker lines contrasting with the white paper so that you can see it so that the child can then write on a straight line. There's also signature guides, which is similar to what I was talking about before the previous slide about writing guides. And it's the size of a credit card with a long rectangle cut inside in the middle. And what you do is you place it onto where the signature needs to be, and then you can have the person who's blind sign their name, their signature on that area, and it'll be in the right area. Okay? And for those who cannot hold a pencil at all, whole hand grabs using rubber stamps would be really helpful with numbers or letters. So there I showed you stamps where there's a whole handle so that the child can hold it fully and then stamp it and then, stamp out their words. And of course, depending on the level of their age, they might need that or they might need like an iPad or something. But again, we're talking about low-tech adaptations at the moment, right? Okay, let's move on to the next step, which is pre-writing. Graphic organizers are really popular. If you look at the image that's on the right of the slide, you will notice that there's a graphic organizer, the main topic, and then 3 subtopics. Sometimes there's 5 for a 5-paragraph essay, let's say. And then each one will have a subtopic and then the following supporting statements that are underneath that, right? But there's also ones that are on your phone or on a tablet. The one that I hyperlink under the word graphic organizers is one called iBrainstorm. Is also the image right below the physical graphic organizer where you can move things around and adjust stuff. All right, graphic organizers are also known as think sheets. They help students start the planning process. There's a computerized graphic organizer as well. If you take a moment to stop here and then watch the video, you will see a student demonstrate how to use a computerized graphic organizer instead. And the next thing is the templates. So templates are really helpful for people who have learning disabilities or attention deficit. They're basically pre-made graphic organizers provide a structure for specific writing genres. Free to concentrate on filling out the correct content as opposed to trying to think of what to do. And so if you look here, I hyperlinked it to a science one. So let's say that they're doing a lab report, right? So it'll say things like, name, title, hypothesis, and all that stuff, and it gives you a little quick explanation. So the student will go in there and just delete that part and then write in what their own is. So that way it leaves them to try to figure things out as opposed to going, teacher, how do you do this? Where do I start? What do I need to do? Instead, they can look at this, read it, and then know where to go because it's guiding them. And then the link below called template for the science download is actually, if you click on it, you'll be able to download a sample template of various science related activities. Okay, now let's move on to high-tech adaptations for writing. Word processing apps. And word processing app is just a fancy word of saying basically programs that help you type. So it helps because it makes your handwriting clear, legible text by students, right? Sometimes we have students who write like chicken scratch. Maybe it's you. And sometimes students or other people are like, I don't know what you wrote here because I can't read what it says. By having a word processing app, then we don't have to worry about that anymore. Microsoft Word is probably the most famous, but Google Docs is very popular in the high school, grade school level. There are also iPad apps such as Claro Speak, Write Online, and VoiceStream Writer. So feel free to download any of those or explore them. If they're not there, I'm sure you can also find new ones because, again, technology keeps on going in and out. We never know when things are going to crash and then when things are going to be a success. Here are some advantages when it comes to the word processing apps. Again, legibility of text, so it's easy to read. Potential for publishing on a variety of formats. So you can send it in an email, publish it on Facebook, or whatever it is. There's ease of revision. So you can just click on the delete or the backspace button and it deletes it. Let me tell you how old I am. When I was younger, when I was learning how to type, I had to type on this thing called a typewriter. And on a typewriter, if you were rich, you had a fancy typewriter that had an eraser. So you just press it and it would erase what you just typed. Letter by letter, by the way. But if you were poor, like me growing up, when we had a typo, we would buy this bottle, it's called Whiteout, and we shake it, and then we basically paint white over the typo, right? And then we just had to sit there and wait for it to dry. And so we'll sit there, we might wave our hand in front of it, we might blow on it, would spit all over the place, and we just had to wait for the paint to dry. And then if we were not waiting long enough and we start to type, the paint underneath, which is still wet, would crustify when you type on it. and that would just then mess up the entire sheet. And if you are someone with OCD, let's say, right, all these little paint marks, it's not going to look very professional, right? But that was how we used to do it back in the olden days without computers or fancy typewriters. All right, so again, you do not understand how easy it is now to just do the delete button on a computer and never have to worry about a messy paper ever again, or whiteout, which is horrible. Anyways, okay, so let's go to the next one, which is fluent production of text. So while composing or note-taking, you can actually type it out very easily. Your thoughts and everything, it's not very difficult. 5 is likelihood of supporting applications such as spelling, grammar, and concept mapping. So those are things that are going to help you when it comes to making sure that everything is grammatically correct by going through spell check or Grammarly, which is a wonderful program that I have hyperlinked also in this PowerPoint. And I think that you should download it and put it onto your phone or your tablet or your computer, because it will help you with your writing skills, because it recognizes common grammar mistakes that, let's say, Word spell check doesn't do. All right, and then the other one is portable, easy to replicate electronic text, easy to share. You do not know how easy it is and how fortunate you guys are in 2020 to be able to select all, copy, and paste. Back again in the olden days, when we typed something on a typewriter, it was that one copy. Unless you were also fancy and you had carbon copy paper, where you put 2 pieces of paper with a carbon copy, which is kind of like this black piece of paper, in between, like a sandwich, and then when you type hard enough on your typewriter, it would then press it against to the second sheet. But if you had a typo, you can't white out a typo because they're sandwiched together. Now you know what it feels like to not be a millennial or a Gen Z. And the last thing is potential links to electronic source materials. You can hyperlink, like I do all the time in this PowerPoint, which is not something that we could do on a piece of paper, hyperlink something. So we can now click on something and it'll take us to another article or take us to a resource or something like that, which is amazing. But those are the advantages when it comes to having a word processing app. Another high-tech device is the keyboard. To become proficient at word processing, there's a need to develop some keyboarding skills, which is true. Like every computer or laptop usually has a keyboard. So to be able to write, you need to know how to type, right? Obviously, when it comes to a tablet, which is touchscreen, that's going to be a little bit different, but the typewriting format is still the same. Knowing where the keys are located and being comfortable with where the hands are placed is really, really important, right? You need to practice. How fast do you type and how many fingers do you type? For me, I type with all 10 fingers. Do you type with just 2 fingers? Or 4 fingers, your thumbs and your pointer fingers, and you will see how fast people will type and stuff like that, right? But we want to teach people how to use all their fingers so that, they don't exhaust themselves and stuff like that. One of the great ones is called Typing Club, which is learning how to type. So after this right here, I encourage you to go into it and explore it. Maybe it'll be good for your students as an activity for them, or reward for them, to be honest, because it's a game, for them to learn how to type properly. And then once they're able to recognize all the letters and they've had a little bit of practice, I would encourage them to start playing typing games, because typing game is not teaching them how to type anymore. It's learning how to be more fluent, which is typing faster. Word processing with text-to-speech reads aloud whatever a student types. So let's say that the student has typed out this entire thing in Word. Now we can select it and then have the computer read back to the student. So if the student maybe has a learning disability, something like maybe dyslexia, they might have put 2 words reverse. When they hear it, then they can oh, wait a minute, that's backwards, let me go fix it. And that doesn't require you as an instructor to have to monitor them all the time. It allows them to learn how to be more independent when it comes to writing their papers. They can adjust the speed of reading and voice, and allows people to hear problems in their syntax or spelling. So right there, I hyperlinked how to turn on Word and in Google Docs text-to-speech. Teachers must also have a digital workflow system. Process of distributing assignments, retrieving students' work, and then giving feedback, and then seeing revised work as well. So as a teacher, you also need to have a system. For me as an instructor at the school, I have to use Canvas, right? So that's something that I need to know how to get where the assignments are so I can check them and grade them properly. All right, let's talk about word prediction apps. So it's very similar to autocorrect in the sense like it's anticipating what you're typing and trying to correct it. Difference between word prediction and autocorrect is that word prediction pays attention to context, meaning and rules of grammar, not just typing mistakes. So as you're typing, it's going to know, let's say the word I am going to the store, and you might type in I am going to TWO, the store. It would know that's a number and this sentence does not need a number right now. So it's going to suggest the letter TO instead. Okay, and that's really great because Grammarly is that type of software that will get those things. Okay, spell check will not pick that up. It knows that TWO is also a real word, so it's going to assume that that's the reason why you typed it. Okay, so please take your time and go into word prediction with Brody. He is an adorable kid, and he is going to show you him using a word prediction app and also, I believe, a LiveScribe 3, which is really cool. So I want you guys to watch those things so you can see the technology that children with disabilities are given, depending on, let's say, their IEP or whatever it is that supplies them with technology. Okay, so after you do that, let's go to custom dictionaries. It includes vocabulary that is specific to a particular writing activity or subject. So for example, students are writing about dinosaurs. So when they type the letter A, it will suggest the word Allosaurus. Because in the real dictionary, when you type in the letter A, it's not going to know what, because there's like a million words that start with the letter A, right? So it won't necessarily, but a custom dictionary will pick up these words that are really hard to spell or very specific into this genre of writing. These would be words that a typical dictionary may not also have in their list. Most likely, dictionaries do not have all the different dinosaurs that exist, right? But a custom dinosaur dictionary would have these things. Phonetic dictionaries are programmed to identify misspelled words by the way they sound, not just by the way that they look. So the example would be the word FZIC, but if you said it out loud, it sounds like physic or physical or something like that, right? But it starts with an F because F sounds like an F. So it will recognize that FZIC might be the word physical or the beginnings of the word physical. Autocorrect, like we talked about before, allows you for typing shortcuts. For example, you can type in the word OMW and it'll fill it out as on my way. So on your phones, your Androids and your iPhones, I've hyperlinked directions on how to do that so that let's say that you are in a rush, you don't have to spell out on my way or how are you. For me, I hate typing that up all the time because it requires a question mark and all that stuff. So I programmed mine so it says H-A-Y. And when I type H-A-Y, hey, it will pop up with how are you? And then I just click send and then it'll spell it all out for me. I don't need to say that every time, right? So I encourage you guys to also do the same, maybe for your family members as well, so that it isn't exhausting for them to type like that all the time. There's also speech recognition apps. And speech recognition apps is kind of the opposite of text to speech, which is speech to text now. So what you say gets typed out. A lot of for your phones now do that when you're driving, right? But believe it or not, before smartphones, we did not have that and it was a lot more complicated. So there are things called dictation apps when it comes to this. Dragon Naturally Speaking is one of them. It's probably the most famous, and I think that that company, Nuance, actually probably sells their abilities or their software for iPhones and Amazon and all those people so that they can use it because they have the best, I think anyways, dictation program software. It allows you to dictate his or her own words into a computer that is equipped with a microphone. So right there is a hyperlink to how to do it in Google Docs. So all you need is a microphone and then you can talk and then it will actually type everything out for you. And imagine a student who is a slow typer, they can dictate what they're thinking and then it will come out. That's one more step for them to write successfully, right? Again, so this is all about how to help them think about what they're going to say, speak the thought out loud, speak any punctuation and capitalization, and then read on the monitor what the program understood them to say, decide if that was actually what was to be said, do they recognize any mistakes, and then correct the program if it's misunderstood, and then goes back to picking up on the train of thought that they had. Because sometimes when you're writing and you have a difficulty in writing because of your disability, you might forget what you were thinking because you're struggling to type, right? So by having a speech recognition app, the child or that person can now just speak everything out and then clean it up afterwards so that they don't forget what they were thinking about. All right, now let's talk about reviewing and editing. So using text-to-speech, again, like before, it will read to that student, and then that student can then pick up on the mistakes. Right there, I hyperlinked to how to do it on Microsoft Office, as well as I think the other programs as well. They also have this thing called using highlighting. So that's when each word read or a chunk of writing is highlighted as it goes along. So it's kind of like karaoke in that way. So let's say that the program is reading back to the student. The word that it's saying will also be highlighted as well as it moves along. There's also, again, spell check found in word processing software, offers many words before the right word is seen, which can confuse some people. So again, like we were saying before, if the word is spelled correctly, it's not even going to pick it up. But within the context of the sentence, like the to, there's 3 ways to spell to, right? T-O-O, T-O, and then T-W-O. So a spell check will not pick that up. However, a word processing app would. So here's an example of spell check, which is the word R-E-D-Y. Maybe you spelled ready wrong, right? So R-E-D-Y, if you do a spell check, it might suggest the word ready, read, Rudy, Ray, rely, redo, reds, before it actually suggests the word ready, because it doesn't understand the context of the statement. So again, it helps, but it doesn't help amazingly when it comes to your grammar. It might never even offer the word that you desire. And that's true. Sometimes when I'm typing a text message and I don't know how to spell that word at all, I try to sound it out and my autocorrect will not correct it because it has no idea what I'm trying to type. There's also thesauruses. Thesauruses are basically a resource that gives you synonyms or words that are similar to it. So you don't have to use that same word over and over and over again. There's homonyms as well, which are words that sound the same but are spelled differently and different meanings, such as there, your, to. All those things, there's different ways, and so they're considered homonyms. And a lot of people, believe it or not, do not know which one they're supposed to use, because I text with a lot of people, and I can account to you, a lot of people don't know your. Okay, grammar checker, like we said before, underlines grammatical errors such as incomplete sentences, capitalization errors, punctuation errors, word subject disagreements, and then other errors as well. The con to this, so this is a bad thing about it, is that sometimes seen as a dubious grammar. So if you've ever used Word, sometimes they'll fix the sentence and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right at all. Right? So again, sometimes it doesn't know what it is, but it doesn't always match your writing style as well. So maybe you're a very creative writer and it's trying to cut back on all those adjectives that you are using. It might then hinder your creative writing, right? So here at Grammarly, and it is free, is a hyperlink to their website. I encourage you all to download it. A lot of teachers download it to their computers for their students, because what happens is, let's say you type a sentence, it will actually pop up a little number on the lower right-hand corner usually that says like 2. And that means that it's picked up 2 grammar mistakes. It could be spelling, or it could be grammar itself actually, or like the homonym, you're using the wrong one. And if you pay for Grammarly, it'll even tell you how to correct your paper so that it flows easier and reads easier as well. So again, but Grammarly, I use it, I love it. I think it's so helpful, and many college students I know now are starting to use it as well. Track changes, insert comment features, and wikis. So track changes is a specific thing that's offered in Word. And what it is it allows you to look at a paper and then draw these little bubbles to the side and make comments as an instructor, as a teacher, right? It receives feedback from the teachers, allows for quick feedback without erasing the student's original work, because before teachers had to use a red pen and cross out things, rewrite things, or go into a Word document and then retype everything, but then they deleted the previous statement. It gets really complicated or messy. This way, the teacher can now make comments instead, and then the paper is still in its original sequence. They also do strike-throughs for deletions, and the writer then can see his or her own writing and also the writing of the professor as well. And I've hyperlinked track changes so you can see how to use it. It's really helpful for a lot of people who are writing, like, let's say their thesis, and they're giving it to their committee, and then the committee will respond back with specific comments, but you can still see the original writing as well. Now there's also sharing and publishing. So wikis is one, and you might not use wikis anymore because it's such a OG, like original version of it, because it is what Google Docs is now. It's a method to receive helpful feedback on writing. Students can add content, change content, and edit. If you allow a group of people to be able to edit, you can see all those things in Google Docs, right? So that's what a wiki really is. Google Docs just did their own version of it. And then students can see the editing process in action. And if you want to share and publish, you can also publish it online on a blog or an online journal, or maybe it's a PowerPoint presentation. So there's different types of writing styles and how the final format's going to be. It could be also the student newspaper. It could be a piece of paper that you just print out. It could be just left as an email as well. Okay, now let's talk about some technology tools that support note-taking. So you saw with the Brody video is the Smart Pen, the Echo Pen, the Sky5 pen, or the LiveScribe 3 pen, which is what I've hyperlinked, which is what Brody was using. The LiveScribe 3 pen is amazing and so interesting. It is a little costly though, but it comes along with a notebook, and what it is it records the lecture in the pen. It also allows the student to write, right? And you write in a specialized notebook with all these little dots. And what happens is those dots form a grid, so it knows exactly where your pen was. So if you wanted to hear the notes of being recorded at that moment while you were taking those notes, right? You just push your pen there and it will play back exactly where that is. And it sounds amazing, right? And for some students, they actually use it and benefit greatly from it. Unfortunately, with this is that the notebook is not reusable. So you'll constantly need to buy new books. And because the pen does have ink, you do need to also buy ink for it. However, the recording part, which you can then upload to your computer or whatever, you don't, right? But I'm sure it'll also fill up if it has a certain amount of memory space that it can take. So there are some pros and cons. Maybe give it another 10 years and it will be like seamless somehow. I don't know. But anyways, it is a pen-sized computer that captures both handwriting and audio recordings. Again, I highly encourage you guys to click on that Amazon link, and then there's a video that plays, and then you can learn a little bit more about how the whole thing is. And let me know if you guys end up buying one. And then the next thing is a portable Braille note taker. So there's a note taker by Freedom Scientific that is mentioned in the textbook. However, there are other companies that do it as well. And I've hyperlinked it so you can see. The one I hyperlinked is about I think about $2,500. So they're not cheap, obviously. But it's really fantastic because it has a refreshable Braille display placed beneath the keyboard, which enables the user to read back the notes that they took, right? So you can see on the top part are 8 long rectangles, and those are the dots that are in Braille. And as that person is typing out their notes, they can also refresh at the bottom and then read what they wrote. Okay, and of course there's also an audio output is included for some models. They do, some models they don't. So some of them they can actually read back to the student. There's also capturing devices. Those are smart boards. I'm sure you guys are familiar. Some of you guys are probably using them. Unfortunately, right now, I guess maybe during this pandemic, you are no longer using them. Maybe you took one home. I don't know if that's possible. But anyways, so it's a capturing device. The option of recording and saving all notes written on the board by the digital, think of it as a gigantic tablet, basically, right? Teachers can post the notes to a course management system or a Dropbox folder, and then the Smart Recorder allows audio to be added to the notes for an extra level of support. So again, if it was a lecture, the smartboard would record your voice, record what you wrote on there, and then have it as let's say an MP4 file, and then you can email that or put it somewhere so that the student can download if they choose to do so. We'll explain more about smartboards as we go into another chapter as well. Note-taking services for deaf, hard of hearing students. There's a thing called CART, C-A-R-T, which stands for Communication Access Real-Time Translation. It's used at the courts and records verbatim, which basically means records word for word. Transcription is displayed on a large LED screen, basically, which is light emitting diode. There's also the CPrint, which is a speech-to-text system that was designed by National Technical Institute for the Deaf, specifically as a note-taking system. What it does is it uses an app and trained captionists, and then receives intensive training in text condensed strategies. So for what that is imagine this. Let's say we're sitting in a classroom. There are two people, because usually if it's an hour long, a person who's doing the captioning can get really tired really fast. So there's usually two, and they trade off when one person is tired. So what happens is, let's say that I was talking. The person is going to literally type word for word what I said, but they're not typing like on a regular keyboard that we use. They'll usually use the one that a stenographer uses in a court system. A stenographer has phonetics, and it's only a couple of keys, I believe, and when they type it, it spells out the word, even though they don't type it out just like a keyboard. And for that, the reason why it's important is, let's say that the class is having a conversation. The student should not hear it in note format, right? It should be full word for word what it's saying. And then so they'll do that, and then the student will sit in front of the keyboard, or not the keyboard, I'm sorry, the screen, and then read exactly what is being transcribe. And let's say if it's a group of students, it might say student 1 says this, student 2 says this, student 3 says this, teacher says this, and then that allows the student then to also raise their hand and then contribute to the conversation as well. Because for some classes, the student needs to contribute live with everyone else as well.